Good to know.
So this is getting set. And I also do a backup just in case. Okay, I'm just going to start it and let people in. Hello, I just started up the webinar to let people into the webinar room. So we'll get started in a few minutes. Thank you. Hi, everyone. We're going to give you a few more minutes for people to join the webinar, but we'll get started in 5 or 6 minutes. Thanks.
Are we live now? If I say things, can people hear me?
Yes, there's
Great.
people coming into the webinar.
Okay.
We're live. I'm just going to give them a few minutes since
Sure.
we're a little bit before 3.
Thank you, Gabby. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're just going to wait another 2 minutes or so that folks can still join. Thank you for being here this afternoon. All right, we're just gonna wait one more minute and then we can get going. Okay, I think we have a good number of people. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gabriela Jurasek, and I am the Assistant Commissioner of Community and Digital Engagement with the Department of Planning and Development. And we wanted to welcome you to the Adopt a Landmark informational webinar. I'm going to hand it over to Diana Guvalo, who heads up our Historic Preservation Division. Thank you. Oh, Diana, you're on mute. There we go.
Pardon me. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our citywide Adopt a Landmark 2023 application pre-meeting. My name is Diana Cavallo. I lead the Historic Preservation Division of the Department of Planning and Development. With me today are my colleagues, Canlin Hahn and Dan Kleiber. So we are excited to open a new application round for grants to support the restoration of designated landmark buildings throughout Chicago. Our last application round was in 2021, which resulted in commitments to fund 12 projects with over 4.3 million in Adopt a Landmark grants. Dan will provide an overview of the Adopt a Landmark Fund, the 2023 priority and evaluation criteria, as well as the application requirements. As already indicated, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A box to type in your questions and we will respond following the presentation. Thank you. Dan?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. And can you see my screen?
Yep, looks good.
Great. Hi, everyone. Dan Kleiber with the Department of Planning and Development, Historic Preservation Division. Thank you very much for attending today's overview of the 2023 Adopt a Landmark application funding round. I want to note right at the onset some of the most important details of today's presentation. Number one, that an overview of the Adopt a Landmark program and the relatively simple 4-page 2023 Adopt a Landmark application itself can be found at www.chicago.gov/AAL. Number two, applications are due by Wednesday, June 21st at 4:00 p.m. And three, this year, there is approximately $7 million in total funding available. First, we wanted to provide some background on the Adopt a Landmark program. Citywide Adopt a Landmark program funds are generated by the Neighborhood Opportunity Bonus. The Neighborhood Opportunity Bonus, established in 2016, offers increased development rights for projects located in downtown zoning districts in exchange for payments to the 3 Neighborhood Opportunity Bonus funds. 80% of the funds are allocated to what is called the Neighborhood Opportunity Fund, 10% of the funds go to the Local Impact Fund, and 10% to the Adopt a Landmark Fund. Per the Chicago zoning ordinance, to be considered for funding, Adopt a Landmark projects must be consistent with landmark guidelines, individual projects and scopes must be approved by the Commission on Chicago Landmarks, and funds must be used for substantial interior work within a portion of a building that is open to the public or exterior renovation work that is visible from a public street or both. The work must exceed normal maintenance work. In addition, DPD gives priority to projects that address exterior envelope issues. The department may also establish other funding priorities by rule. This year, the department has prioritized for funding Adopt a Landmark projects that include landmarks that are neighborhood anchors or neighborhood commercial buildings. This funding priority was approved in May 2021 by the Commission. What is a neighborhood anchor and neighborhood commercial building? First of all, both neighborhood anchors and neighborhood commercial buildings could either be individually designated City of Chicago landmarks or contributing buildings within designated City of Chicago landmark districts. Neighborhood anchors were targeted for the positive stabilizing role they play in so many neighborhoods. A neighborhood anchor landmark building is a center or an aspiring center of community life. It can be a gathering place for residents of a neighborhood either formally through, for example, the provision of program social services or religious events, or informally through spontaneous gatherings. Some examples of neighborhood anchor landmark buildings include institutions, legacy buildings, field houses, restaurants, religious buildings, and similar social gathering places. I do want to be clear here, the images shown above are simply representative examples of neighborhood anchors. What is a neighborhood commercial building? These landmark buildings were targeted for the positive role they play in promoting pedestrian activity, small business establishments, and local commerce. Neighborhood commercial landmark buildings are generally small-scale commercial buildings and/or mixed-use buildings with residential uses on upper floors and ground floor retail commercial uses. And again, the images shown above are simply representative examples of neighborhood commercial buildings. In addition to the funding priority of neighborhood anchors and neighborhood commercial just discussed, DPD will further evaluate projects submitted this year based on how many of the following 7 criteria are met, which I will now review. It should be noted that these are not in any order and are all weighted equally. Projects that have not been completed and that address exterior envelope issues. Projects that are located within special qualified investment areas, with priority to projects that are also in Invest Southwest community areas. Qualified investment areas are areas designated as low to moderate income areas as determined by census data. A map of both of the qualified investment areas highlighted with the hatch marks and the Invest Southwest community area boundaries in purple is in front of you. Links to separate versions of these maps, as well as information on the qualified investment areas and Invest Southwest program, can be found right in the Adopt a Landmark application on page 4. And if you had difficulty determining if the property in question is in one or both of these areas, feel free to email us at landmarks@cityofchicago.org. The next 2 evaluation criteria: projects that leverage additional project investment such that the requested Adopt a Landmark funds fill financing gaps. Projects that will have a positive catalytic impact on the community in which they are located. The impact may be in the form of new permanent jobs created, commercial leasing to new businesses, providing new services, for example, soup kitchens, adult education training, after-school programs, childcare services, etc. And the last 3 criteria: projects that address and prevent further deterioration of the subject property's structural and architectural integrity caused by natural misfortune, such as storm damage, fire, flooding, etc., or buildings that are situationally threatened as determined on a case-by-case basis. Projects that will rehabilitate vacant or underutilized buildings to make them ready for occupancy or improve their occupancy. This may include an interior and exterior scope of work with Adopt a Landmark funds to be used for qualified exterior work. Finally, projects that are shovel-ready and will be completed within 2 years. In terms of the application itself and the submission requirements, page 3 of the application details all of the items that we will need with each application. Number 1, a letter requesting the funds and a narrative of the project that describes the overall project, the project timeline, including projected start and end dates, and any time constraints affecting the project, as well as an explanation of why Adopt a Landmark funds are needed in the first place. 2, 11 by 17 inch existing and proposed plans, elevations, and details of the project to the extent available. 3D color renderings as applicable as well. The goal here is for the drawings to correspond to the specific scope of work and budget that is proposed. The itemized project budget and written scope of work itself. The budget should separate hard costs from soft costs and must include line items for title company escrow fees and a third-party architect engineer firm to monitor disbursements of escrow funds. Please also identify the basis of the cost estimates for the proposed work. Are they architect estimates? Are they contractors' estimates? Are they actual bids from contractors, etc.? Please note that projects awarded Adopt a Landmark Fund grants over $250,000 must comply with the City of Chicago's MWBE and local hiring requirements. Finally, identified sources of funds as applicable for project costs not covered by Adopt a Landmark funds, as well as other project phases if the project requesting Adopt a Landmark funds is one phase of a multi-phase project. In addition, photographs of the property and the areas of the proposed work, any exterior wall condition assessment reports and Department of Building violations as applicable, lists of consultants, contractors, professionals to be retained and their credentials, relevant past experience with historic buildings, etc. List of any other financial incentives received or that may be received if an application has been submitted or is to be submitted for the project. An economic disclosure statement, and documentation or other information to address the funding priority and evaluation criteria listed on page 4. And this is very important. Just wanted to highlight that this particular aspect of the submission is sometimes overlooked, but this is very important. We want to hear how you think that the project meets the funding priority as well as those evaluation criteria. Again, the applications submitted to the department will be reviewed for completeness of the submission requirements and conformance with the funding priority and how many of the evaluation criteria are met, which we have now gone over. If selected by DPD for a preliminary award of Adopt a Landmark funds, DPD staff will then work with each applicant to prepare the respective project, including the proposed scope of work and associated Adopt a Landmark budget for review and approval by the Commission at the appropriate time. Please note that projects selected by DPD that provide Adopt a Landmark fund grants over $250,000 will also require approval of the City Council. It should also be noted that depending on the specific scope of work, projects may also first require a trip to the Permit Review Committee. Looking ahead, once a project is approved by the Commission, the property owner receiving the funds must enter into an Adopt a Landmark agreement with the City of Chicago and the Commission regarding the manner in which the funds will be used. The agreement contains specific detailed requirements for receiving the Adopt a Landmark funds. An image of the template agreement that we use is in front of you now. Please go to the department's website, again, chicago.gov/AAL, to review this template Adopt a Landmark agreement with all of the obligations to be expected of all applicants, including other local, state, and federal laws and regulations. Please do not fill this template agreement out as part of your application submission. It is available on the website for reference purposes only to give prospective applicants an idea of the legal, financial, and contractual obligations associated with these projects. It's also strongly encouraged by DPD to have an attorney, a contractor, and/or an accountant, as applicable, to review all of the requirements of the Adopt a Landmark agreement so they are also all familiar with them. A couple of key things that we want to highlight about these projects is, again, that all projects require landmark owners to have a third-party inspecting architect on board as part of the project that must be approved by DPD. The role of this person is actually to help DPD review the progress of the project once it has commenced and help with reviewing the draws from the escrow. Again, this will need to be a true third-party architect that is separate from a project architect. Also, all projects will require an escrow account to be set up to deposit city funds and private funds as applicable. The exhibits in the template Adopt a Landmark agreement contain a template escrow agreement as well, so you can get a feel now for the specific requirements should you be selected by DPD. And again, these are not things that you need to fill out or establish now as part of the actual application. Please do not do this. And you do not need to engage a third-party inspecting architect right now as well. These are just the requirements that will be part of the agreement should you be selected. Lastly, again, it bears repeating, projects selected by DPD that provide Adopt a Landmark Fund grants over $250,000 will also require approval of the City Council and must comply with the City of Chicago's MBE, WBE, and local hiring requirements. In conclusion, again, the due date for applications is June 21st, which is a Wednesday at 4:00 p.m. And also, again, to obtain an overview of the program, as well as the application itself, the template, Adopt a Landmark agreement, etc., please go to the website listed above, chicago.gov/AAL. Any questions can always be sent via email to landmarks@cityofchicago.org. Thank you. And now we can address any questions that you may have. Thanks.
Gabby and I have been busy typing up answers while you've been talking, Dan. We answered these, but just in case these were questions were on anyone else's minds, it was not a prerequisite that people watch this presentation to be able to apply. The purpose of this was for people's information to help them in the application process. Gabby did provide all of our names and the general email. And Gabby, there was just one more detail in Mr. Porris's question, which was, when would the presentation be available?
As soon as Dan sends it over to me and we can upload it to the website. So we could do that later this afternoon or at the latest in the morning.
And will that be like a link, a URL that someone can share with people?
Yeah, so the web page for all of this information is chicago.gov/AAL. And you can get all of the resources there. And we will put a link to the YouTube video of the presentation and a PDF of the actual slides for reference on that page as well.
Okay. Deanna, I'm going to throw this one to you. Kyle Huber is asking, is there a list or map of landmark districts that show their boundaries?
Yes, you can find the boundaries on the zoning map. There is one of the layers that you can see in the menu that identifies individual landmarks and landmark districts. The one thing to note for landmark districts, the qualifying properties would need to be deemed contributing to the landmark district. We are always available to respond to any questions that you have about the property if you feel you need to clarify whether it would qualify or not. So if you feel free to email us that as well. We also have on our website a list of addresses that you can download and clarify, already designated landmarks.
Okay, the next question from Kendra Parzan. Dan, this would go to you because you deal with this detail. Do all contractors/consultants have to be definitively selected before applying, or is it possible to finalize at a later point?
They definitely do not all need to be solidified at the time of application. No, but if a project is selected, then definitely, we will work with that applicant, and we do eventually want to see signed contracts and things like that, but they are not required for the submission.
Okay, and here's another one for you, Dan, from Leslie Kane. Does the economic disclosure statement have to be completed online as part of the application submission?
That is a great question. We would actually prefer that you supply us an actual hard copy of the EDS. Certainly, we do have a link on the application to where you can get the EDS forms, but it would be wonderful if you could supply us with an actual EDS itself, as part of the overall submission, and not. So, in other words, you do not. you don't have to submit it online. If you could just give it to us, that would be great.
Okay. Oh, and this is interesting question from David Wu. Are past grantees eligible to apply again?
I can answer that. Yes, there is nothing to prevent someone from applying multiple times.
Great. And again, for either of you, from Kurt Lynch, can a project where the work covered by this grant application be limited to complete engineering studies for future phases of the restoration project?
I can take that one. The code really specifically identifies that the funds should go towards actual restoration, repair, rehabilitation work. So costs to work to the buildings. There could be some associated soft costs for, let's say, preparing drawings for your consultants, along with the hard costs, but it's not meant to be just for, evaluation report or an engineering study alone.
Great. And from Kendra Parson, is there an upper limit on grant award amounts?
There isn't one set. We obviously have a limited amount in our grant available to us this year. As Dan said, it's up to 7 million. We try to make sure that we can work with as many applicants as possible. Grants that are of $250,000 or less go through a certain process that includes the commission, but it does not need to go through city council approval. Any grants above 250,000 have different requirements and do require city council approval.
If I could just add too, that you can ask for a certain amount, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's where we'll end up too with our grant award, just so that's clear.
This is kind of a big question. Raymond Wool is asking, are there state or local grants that can be applied for in conjunction?
You can have other incentives, grants, tax credits as part of your overall project. We just want to make sure that the Adopt a Landmark grants are identified distinctly, so we know that we are not applying these different grants toward the same scope of work. And
Dan, can you please share with Leslie Skousen and everybody else, there was an acronym a few slides ago that included Chicago WLD. Was this about fair labor practices if the grant is over 250,000? Does that ring a bell?
The grant awards, if selected and approved by DPD, that are over $250,000, those types of projects do have special additional requirements, including MBE, WBE, and other local residency requirements of the city of Chicago. So those do kick in if we award a total amount of grant funds in excess of $250,000. I would encourage everyone to look at the template agreement that we have on our website now. And again, it is for reference purposes only. Please do not fill this out at this time as part of an application, but you should familiarize yourself with all of the program requirements that are really embodied in that agreement. All of the other state laws, federal laws, and other local ordinances that affect projects like this. So please look at that.
And just to break that down, MBE is Minority Business Enterprise and WBE is Women's Business Enterprise, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
And those, so what that means is for those projects that if selected and $250,000 or more, that those projects would have to meet the standards for the city's MBE WBE program, which means 26% of the dollar volume of of the construction contracts, would need to be awarded to qualified MBE certified companies, and 6% for qualified WBEs. And then the city resident labor hours, what that means is that 50% of the labor hours on the job, so whenever this project commences, 50% of those labor hours must be performed by actual City of Chicago residents. But again, those, just to repeat myself, sorry, but those requirements kick in only if the grant award is $250,000 or over.
And also, just to build off of that, I believe you can find a directory of currently certified businesses on the Department of Procurement Services website. So I believe this is the link that you can search for people who are currently certified, which may be a quicker way than working with somebody who has to go through the certification process still.
That is very helpful, Gabby. Thank you. Okay, another question. What is the total amount of funding available for this grant cycle, and what's the maximum amount available per awardee?
Well, Deanna answered that one. I'll take that one again too. So the total, approximately, we have approximately $7 million in total funding available. So like Deanna said, it would be our goal to spread that around to as many, different projects as possible to keep me busy. So that's our goal. But again, I think it's important too to note, you can, an application can come in and ask for, you can ask for all $7 million. Doesn't mean we're going to give it out. Doesn't mean we're going to award that amount of money. And that goes with smaller grants as well. I mean, we may end up where, our preliminary award is not what, precisely what you've asked for.
Great. I'll switch this around, Deanna. I'll throw it to you to balance it out. Lizette Herndon is asking, does a building have to be certified as a Chicago landmark in order to apply for the Adopt a Landmark grant?
So the code does require that you need to be a Chicago landmark in order to receive the grant. So if you are in the process of landmark designation currently, it's very likely that you can reach that landmark designation through City Council by the time all of these applications are due, or shortly within that time period. So the application deadline is June 21st. But if you are not at all in the process or are not a landmark currently, then it would not apply.
But you're welcome to talk to us about becoming a landmark. So, drop us a line at landmarks@cityofchicago.org. Dan, for you, from Domenica Pappas, can you confirm that the proposal is a paper submission and also requires a USB drive? And can we drop off the proposal in person? And if so, please provide an exact location.
Yes, we would like a paper copy of the submission things that I went over. And yes, we would like an electronic copy. And if a USB, if that's not the correct nomenclature these days in 2023, something that we can access PDF type files. I will just say it like that. And yes, you certainly can drop that off in person. I believe our official address is DPD, City of Chicago, 121 North LaSalle, room 1000. That is our official department address. And someone is there and can accept the delivery, and then they will call me and I will go get it.
And Dan, as you are the most helpful person here, I'm going to throw this one to you. Not that others of you aren't helpful, but when it comes to Adopt a Landmark, you're the man with working with everybody. Jennifer Adkins is asking, will there be assistance offered for applicants?
Absolutely, we can offer assistance for sure. And depending on how this goes, it's possible we could have another webinar if necessary during the application period, if that would be helpful. But yes, for sure, we'd be happy to help with submission requirements for the projects. We want to get the funds out, so yes.
And I've heard Daniel, he's very, very helpful, will answer whatever questions you need to help you along. So, Deanna from Nathaniel Kachaturian, is there an anticipated number of projects that will be awarded landmark status this year?
I think I'm going to answer this two ways. If you're asking for landmark status, that technically means landmark designation. We don't necessarily have a predetermined number of projects that would reach that level through City Council. But if you're more specifically asking how many projects would be selected to receive the grant award, that really depends on the number of applications and if there are any, and at what point do we reach the limit of our grant amount. So we have up to $7 million that we can award if we have qualifying projects to award them to. As I mentioned, in 2021, we awarded 12 projects. So we are happy to award as many projects as we can. So we don't have a set limit.
Okay. Arvidas Lausius is asking, is there an average size of grant, and will landmarks fund part of the project cost if the owner escrows the balance?
So I think most of our grants are somewhere in the range of $250,000. And we do actually, as one of the criteria, look at whether the funds that we are supplying are used to leverage other funds so the property owner is contributing to a larger project and the Adopt a Landmark funds are there to close the gap.
Okay, and this would be one that both of you, I'm sure, worked on the answer for. Is a third-party licensed structural engineer allowed, or must it be an architect?
It really should be a licensed architect, someone who, has someone ideally who has specific experience in historic preservation projects. I think we could look at a licensed engineer as well, as a possibility, but ideally it would be a licensed architect.
Yeah, it's kind of a new question for the program. Kendra, again, is asking, are all types of property owners eligible to apply, for example, nonprofit, for-profit, publicly owned buildings?
Absolutely. All correct. Individuals, nonprofits, LLCs, corporations, we do, at the end of the day, our landmark agreements, again, if selected, are with the landmark owner. So, but it could be an agreement between the city and a landmark owner, but maybe, the funds maybe perhaps go to a separate entity, or, that can be, structured that way. But at the end of the day, our agreements should be with the city and an owner, but any type of applicant or individual can apply, and you can even apply on behalf of another owner if they, if you're working together with them,
Okay, this maybe not sure I understand this question. Maybe you guys are clear on this. I already own a building that has been deemed as a landmark. Am I able to apply for this new purchases? Am I able to apply for this for new purchases? I'm not sure if they're talking about new work on the building or for additional buildings.
Well, the program is definitely for restoration costs only. And so it wouldn't be applicable to any like property acquisition costs or anything like that. But certainly for restoration costs, and like Deanna said too, any associated soft costs that, might be part of those restoration costs, if that might be an architect or an engineer or even an attorney to an extent.
Yeah, I think that was probably what they were getting at. Sorry. Jennifer Adkins is asking whether applications need aldermanic approval.
They do not need aldermanic approval. No, we certainly would welcome the support of an elected official and any other community groups, advocacy groups. But certainly it's not a requirement that Adopt a Landmark project have aldermanic approval. We would, again, if selected, we certainly would want to make the local elected official aware of the project, and as it goes through the process, we certainly would like to keep them aware, and hopefully they would be in support of it as well along the way, because we have to go through the Landmarks Commission, and like I said, in some cases we have to go to City Council too. So,
and that's just something standard we do for any kind of project that goes through the commission, is let aldermen know when it's something in their ward. So yeah, this wouldn't be any different. Raymond Wool is asking for some recommendations. He says that their landmark is in a park. How would you recommend proceeding with local fundraising? Do you recommend the community raising a third of the funds, a third from the city and a third from Chicago Parks or another entity? What's the ratio of fundraising?
I don't know that I have an answer to how to raise the funds specifically, but I think it really depends on what is the cost of the project to do the restoration or rehab that is being proposed. And if there's nothing to prevent an application that is of a different split, it doesn't mean third or half. It could be in any other percentage. But at the end of the day, what we are evaluating is that it meets the parameters of the program, the code requirements, that it meets the standards as far as the rehabilitation, and that it meets all of the priorities and criteria, because it's a competitive process. So we do need to have a way to evaluate and determine which projects rise to the highest level of compliance with the criteria, and also then which ones can be funded depending on the ask and how much we have in the actual fund itself. So we don't have a specific number to assign, per application or a maximum grant ask.
Hey, next question from Bruce Watts. Are there requirements governing the method of contractor selection? For example, lump sum bidding, CMGMP, etc.
There are no requirements other than that they be a licensed City of Chicago, contractor, at the end of the day. The only requirements specific that kick in again would be if projects are awarded over $250,000, then they do. The requirements are that those types of projects utilize 26% MBE contractors, minority business enterprise contractors, and 6% women business enterprise contractors, as well as the other labor requirements that I mentioned. 50% of the job hours must be performed by City of Chicago residents. But no, the method or the type of contract isn't other than those requirements isn't something that is that we need to be involved with.
Great. I think you've touched on part of this question from Jason Glumvicki. He asked if there was a maximum amount for a request. I think you touched on that. But on average, what is the size of grant funded? So an average.
An average so far has been 250,000.
All right.
Okay. Then from the Sardos, a question, after the June 21st due date, when can we expect approvals and decisions from the commission?
Sure. Well, we are targeting, so again, it does depend on how many we get. We have $7 million. So if we get 28 $250,000 projects, that's a fair amount. But we are targeting on or about, no later than October 1st for DPD to provide, preliminary awards. That's our target. I would presume that we would then, make an informational type of overview to the commission, of those selected, proposed selected preliminary awardees. But then each one of the selected projects does have to go for a specific Commission on Chicago Landmarks meeting, to review the very specific details of their scope and their budget, etc. And like I said, too, it depends on the particular project, but some of the projects may also even require the permit review committee step before that. That depends on the specific scope of work. But it's important to know every single project, no matter the size, does have to go to the Commission on Chicago Landmarks for review and approval of the budget and scope. And we would work with each applicant on that, with their timing in mind, and get them ready for when we could make it to a particular commission meeting. The commission meets monthly. You can actually look on our website for the calendar of the rest of the year's commission meetings, just to get kind of like a ballpark of things.
And yeah, that would be at cityofchicago.org/CCL, standing for Commission on Chicago Landmarks. Can an organization pursue historic landmark status while applying for the grant?
I can take that. So initiating and going through the whole process of landmark designation from commission through city council usually takes anywhere between 6 months to a year. So certainly we are happy to talk offline if there are property owners who wish to discuss with us whether their project or their property qualifies and can go through landmark designation process. It would not qualify them for this application round, however, but it does not mean that you are not able to do that in the future, because we anticipate that we would do application rounds. Everything depends on how much we have in the Adopt a Landmark Fund itself, but we do anticipate having an annual application round.
Okay, this is kind of a complex question, but Raymond Wool is asking. First of all, he's saying grants can be a catalyst. The application and the process will improve our chances of success, but how would you recommend groups who are mid fundraising and can't complete the project without this particular grant? Would June 21st, will June 21 be the snapshot? What is your timeline for site visits and working with the new alderman coming to our ward?
I think if I can just maybe start with the first part. So if you are in the middle of fundraising for a project and you need this grant to complete that, but you may not be able to secure all the funds that you're fundraising within that timeline of our application, you can still apply. As we indicated, this is a preliminary award. So if you have a path towards, let's say, finishing up all of your funding and securing to be able to start maybe within a year, we can make a commitment that within, for example, that period of time, you will come through with all of the other requirements, and we'll go through the process that Dan described, going through the Landmarks Commission and on to an agreement and funding the project. So it does not mean you cannot apply if you don't have all your funds raised at this time. We
Great.
will probably, and I'm sorry to interrupt, we will probably, as part of any commitment, give a specific timeline to each applicant for them to be able to then finalize the entire process with us through to agreement. So it's not going to be necessarily an immediate thing. It could be within the next year or so.
Jason Kobicki's asking, is there a page or word or character limit for the letter requesting the funds and narrative of the project portion of the submission? And I'm going to add, or Dan, maybe is there an ideal length of information or submission that you would like to see?
I mean, there's no limit, but we don't, I think a couple of well worded paragraphs on why you need the funds is really important. The overall timeline, the scope of work. There's no real limit. We don't need it to be 20 pages, but certainly having enough so that we can get a full scope of the project. That we this is public too, and we want to be able to share your good story with the commissioners if you're selected and we go through. So try and think about it like that. But we certainly won't ding you if it's too long. We certainly, and it's possible if necessary, we can always ask for more information if it's too short.
And another friend from Landmarks Illinois, Suzanne German, is asking, is there a match requirement?
No, there is no match requirement. Like Deanna said, and I presented one of our evaluation criteria, though, is, does the project leverage other sources? So we would look favorably on a project that did combine other sources, whether they be private or public or other grants or whatever. But that doesn't mean that there has to be those other sources. We certainly have funded projects that are completely from Adopt a Landmark funds. So, and that is something that we certainly can do.
Okay, Raymond Wall is asking, will your team be available for some technical assistance to help our group divide our project with short, middle, and long range assistance?
I think we can definitely help, on technical assistance. Mm-hmm. Sure.
And Steve Forrest is asking about M and WBE. Will compliance with M/WBE and city residency be tracked separately if the project is otherwise being tracked by the city pursuant to Department of Housing funding?
No, that's a great question. We actually, no, it won't be tracked. It will be tracked by that same Department of Housing in their compliance division. If a project is awarded over $250,000 and all those labor requirements kick in, we will work with our compliance co-workers in the housing department to administer that portion of your overall project.
Great.
And the requirements for those, by the way, are all also listed in the template Adopt a Landmark agreement, and they are verbatim with the requirements in other similar City of Chicago redevelopment agreements, etc.
Okay. Question about types of projects. Can the funding apply to residential buildings?
I will say that it can, any landmark owner, it must be a City of Chicago individual landmark or a contributing building within a City of Chicago landmark district. Any owner can apply. However, as I noted, the funding priority this year is for neighborhood anchor buildings and neighborhood commercial buildings. So keep that in mind, when you're evaluating your proposal.
Okay. And Raymond Wool has a specific strategy question. He's saying, what is the smallest grant in your history? Getting a grant from our agency would be leveraged. So they're willing to take a smaller amount and continue fundraising based on that smaller grant. Is that a worthwhile strategy?
The smallest one that I am familiar with that I worked on was for the Glessner House Museum, and that was for $100,000. And absolutely, that sure, again, if, especially like I said, if it leverages other funds, that's one of our evaluation criteria. So,
Right. Jennifer Adkins is asking if there will be third-party assistance that can be paid for their assistance.
well, we certainly can't provide any funding until we have an agreement. I mean, if you're asking, do we have any other special funds like now? I mean, the answer, not through this program. But if you're asking, could costs be, part of an overall scope that you're incurring, now? I mean, if approved and if it meets the requirements and if we preliminary award it, those costs could be included as part of your project if they're directly related, to your adopted landmark. Like if you have to, kind of front fund only like an architect's fees or something. Again, I want to be really clear. That doesn't mean we're awarding the project, but that could be something that becomes part of an approved budget. Once we go to the commission for funding. I hope that makes sense.
Let's see. Now we're getting into the area of escrow accounts. Michelle Renard is asking, do we have to have an escrow account set up at the time of application?
No, absolutely not. Please do not do that. No, 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 no.
Another question from Jennifer Adkins. Is this a reimbursement grant? Will applicants need to show liquidity percents?
We want to make sure if there are, it depends on the project. If there are other funds, we do want to make sure you have those funds. And, ideally we have the entire project budget, in the escrow, so that if it's whatever, if it ends up 50-50 and there's $250,000 from an applicant and $250,000 from the city, we have the entire $500,000, in there. I hope that answers the question.
Basic question about landmarking. How can we find out if we have Chicago landmark designation status? This might have been done on our building about 20 years ago.
You can look at the zoning ordinance. The Chicago zoning ordinance is the best, quickest place. Just type in your address at the zoning ordinance, go right there on the map, and it should be highlighted in red. You can always, or hatch marked in red. You can always ask us as well at landmarks.org if a particular building is a City of Chicago landmark.
And I think, Dan, that URL for what you're talking about, you'd want to go to the Department of Planning and Development's website, which will give you another one of those URLs, cityofchicago.org/DPD, standing for Department of Planning and Development. When you get to that page, you're going to look on the right side, and there's a link to zoning map. And when you go click on that, the map's going to open up, and you're going to be able to type in an address, and it'll be a map with a lot of layers, GIS layers that'll show you zoning and landmarking and wards and all kinds of stuff. So it's a very convenient map, helpful map used by a lot of us here at the city, and it's available to the public.
We also have a list too of all City of Chicago landmarks on DPD's historic preservation website. We have, a PDF listing by address and by name of landmark, including at the back of the document, the landmark districts.
So multiple ways to get that information. A question about construction. Can the project be in construction prior to the preliminary award date? We're looking to submit for permit review in June.
I can take that, Dan. The project should not be under construction. We do need to go through commission review for scope of work and budget for the grant. And the agreement needs to be in place. So I would say That's a very difficult timeline for us to really understand and definitively say you can do. So if you have follow-up questions, we're happy to respond to that. But the basic thing is that the commission needs to pre-approve the scope of work and budget for the grant.
Okay. We've got about 5 more minutes. I've got one more question here. So, Gianna, I'm going to throw this one to you. Do you foresee a biennial frequency for the program in the future?
It's possible, but you know, right now I can see annual only. A lot would depend on the funds, total funds available every year to us. That might dictate the frequency if we needed to increase the number of application rounds.
And Gabby, you've been keeping your eyes on the chat. Did any questions pop up in there?
No, we're good. I was just posting some links for people.
Okay. I think that's it for our Q&A.
Great.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. And please, if you do have follow-up questions, email us. We'll be happy to respond. And we really look forward to receiving a lot of applications and to look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you.